Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! As the clock struck 9 on a gray Monday morning, Porter's fate was sealed. The subject line of the email, "Company Restructuring," flashed on his screen, a harbinger of the somber news. That day, the once vibrant startup had lost its sheen. It was downsizing, leaving Porter abruptly unemployed. In the quiet of his home, where only half-filled cardboard boxes and a desolate bank account kept him company, Porter reflected on the past 3 years, now reduced to an all-too-common story of a startup's demise. It had been a whirlwind of long hours and dedication, ultimately amounting to a formidable learning curve. And now, with minimal savings and a pile of impending expenses, Porter wondered where his next chapter would begin. The San Francisco rental market was merciless, and his savings wouldn't stretch beyond another month. His brown hair fell into his eyes as he hunched over his laptop, scrolling through job listings that either required more experience or offered insulting wages. The phone rang, breaking his spiral of despair. "Porter? You sound terrible." Rebecca's familiar voice came through the speaker. "Just living the dream," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Got any magical job opportunities in your back pocket?" Rebecca had been his closest friend since college. While he'd pursued computer science, she'd charged into marketing and climbed the corporate ladder with impressive speed. Now she worked as a brand director for a luxury cosmetics company, with the salary to match. "Actually, I might have something better. My roommate just moved out, and I've got a spare bedroom sitting empty. Why don't you move in until you land on your feet?" Porter sat up straighter in his worn office chair. "I can't afford half your rent, Beck. Your place is way out of my league." "Who said anything about paying rent?" She laughed. "Look, I'm barely home with all the travel I'm doing. What I need is someone to keep the place running. Mail, plants, cleaning, maybe some cooking when I'm home. The guest room is yours, if you want it." Porter hesitated, his pride battling with practicality. "I don't know. Think about it. You'd be doing me a favor, honestly. My place looks like a tornado hit it, and I keep killing every houseplant I touch." By the weekend, Porter had moved his meager belongings into Rebecca's spacious 2-bedroom apartment in Pacific Heights. The contrast between his former studio and her stylish home was stark. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows with a partial view of the bay. His new bedroom was larger than his entire previous apartment. "Ground rules," Rebecca announced, after helping him unpack the last box. She wore designer jeans and a crisp white blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Kitchen needs to stay clean, no wild parties when I'm traveling, and maybe figure out how not to kill my ficus." Porter glanced at the withering plant in the corner. "I make no promises about the ficus, but I can handle the rest." The first week passed smoothly. Porter established a routine of job hunting in the mornings and handling household chores in the afternoons. He found a strange comfort in the domestic tasks. The methodical process of cleaning, organizing, and maintaining the apartment gave his days structure while the job search dragged on. Rebecca returned from a business trip on Friday evening, dropping her luggage in the foyer with a dramatic sigh. Porter emerged from the kitchen where he'd been preparing dinner.
"Welcome back to civilization,"
he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "How was Milan?" Rebecca kicked off her heels. "Exhausting. Beautiful. The usual." She sniffed the air appreciatively. "What are you making? It smells amazing." "Just pasta carbonara. Nothing fancy." Rebecca wandered into the kitchen inspecting the spotless countertops and organized cabinets. "Wow, you've been busy. The place looks—" She paused, running a finger along the gleaming stovetop. "Almost perfect." Porter raised an eyebrow. "Almost?" A mischievous smile spread across Rebecca's face. "Well, if you're going to be a proper housekeeper, you're missing something essential." She disappeared into her bedroom, returning moments later with a shopping bag. "I couldn't resist. It was meant as a joke, but—" Porter peered into the bag and immediately stepped back. "No way." "Come on, it's hilarious." Rebecca pulled out a classic French maid's uniform, black with white trim, complete with a frilly apron and headpiece.
You can't be serious.
Porter crossed his arms over his chest, the wooden spoon still clutched in one hand. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and faded jeans, his brown hair slightly messy from cooking. "Just try it on. I swear I won't take pictures." Rebecca's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Besides, haven't you ever wondered, even a little bit? Wondered what it's like to dress in women's clothing?"
Can't say it's been high on my list of life experiences,
Porter replied, though something in his tone lacked conviction. Rebecca's expression softened.
Look, we've known each other for, 8 years?
I remember sophomore year when you helped me with that performance art piece and had to wear that ridiculous costume. That was different. It was for your grade. And this is for my entertainment. She pushed the bag into his hands. Just 5 minutes. Then dinner. I've had the week from hell, and I need a laugh. Porter sighed, taking the bag.
The things I do for free rent,
he muttered, heading toward his bedroom. The outfit was exactly what he expected. A stereotypical costume, probably meant for Halloween or bachelorette parties. The dress itself was black polyester with a built-in petticoat that made the skirt flare out dramatically. White lace trimmed the short sleeves and hemline. The apron tied at the waist, and the headband had a small white ruffle across the top. Porter stared at himself in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the figure reflected back. The dress fit surprisingly well across his lean frame, though it was shorter than he expected, ending mid-thigh. His legs, exposed beneath the hem, looked strange and vulnerable. The whole effect was ridiculous, yet something about the transformation fascinated him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the bathroom. Rebecca's reaction was immediate. A gasp followed by delighted laughter. "Oh my God! This is perfect!" She circled around him, taking in every detail. "You need a name." "A name?" "For your alter ego." Rebecca tapped her chin thoughtfully. "How about Dorothy?" Porter rolled his eyes.
As in, the Wizard of Oz?
"Exactly. Because you're not in Kansas anymore, sweetheart." She adjusted the headband in his brown hair. "Dorothy it is."
"Dinner's getting cold,"
Porter said, trying to maintain some dignity as he turned back toward the kitchen. "Wait!" Rebecca grabbed her phone. "Just one photo. For posterity." "You promised!" I crossed my fingers. "Come on, one picture. I won't show anyone." Porter sighed, placing one hand on his hip in mock fashion pose. "Fine. One picture, then I'm changing." The camera clicked, and Rebecca smiled at the result. "Perfect! Dorothy's first appearance." After dinner, Porter changed back into his normal clothes, and they spent the evening watching movies. The maid outfit incident became a shared joke between them, something Porter assumed would fade with time. He was wrong. 2 weeks later, Rebecca returned from another business trip with shopping bags. Porter was in the living room, laptop open as he responded to yet another rejection email. I got you some things, Rebecca announced, setting the bags on the coffee table. Porter eyed them suspiciously.
Please tell me it's not more costumes.
Not exactly. Rebecca began removing items from the bags. Jeans, t-shirts, blouses, and even a sundress, all in women's styles. I thought Dorothy might need a more practical wardrobe. The maid outfit is cute, but not exactly everyday wear. Porter stared at the growing pile of clothing.
Beck, the maid thing was a one-time joke.
Was it, though? Rebecca leaned against the sofa. You've been cleaning this apartment better than any service I've ever hired, and don't think I haven't noticed how you rearranged my closet by color and season. That's just being organized.
That's being Dorothy.
Rebecca held up a soft blue blouse. The cleaning service charges me $200 each visit. You're saving me a fortune. The least I can do is provide a proper uniform. Porter fingered the blouse, surprised by the silky texture.
This seems like a slippery slope.
It's an experiment, Rebecca countered. Besides, you haven't had a single callback on your applications. What else are you doing with your time? The logic was twisted, but Porter couldn't argue with the job market reality. Each day brought more silence from potential employers, and his technical skills were growing staller by the minute.
Just around the apartment,
he finally said. And nothing weird. Rebecca clapped her hands together. Deal. Let's start with these. She handed him a pair of women's jeans and the blue blouse. In his bedroom, Porter examined the clothing more closely. The jeans were a dark wash, with a high waist and slight stretch. The blouse was a powder blue with small pearl buttons down the front and a delicate collar. Both items looked surprisingly normal, not costume-like at all. He slipped into the jeans, surprised by how well they fit around his hips and thighs. The blouse buttoned up easily over his chest, the fabric draping in a flattering way he hadn't expected. Looking in the mirror, he saw a strange blend of himself and someone new. His brown hair needed styling, and his face was still unmistakably masculine, but the clothing transformed his silhouette into something softer, more curved. Rebecca whistled when he emerged. Wow, with a little makeup, you'd actually make a pretty convincing woman. Porter tugged at the blouse self-consciously.
This feels weird. But not bad weird, right?
Rebecca studied him thoughtfully. The jeans actually look better on you than they did on me. You've got the height for them.
Thanks, I think.
Porter moved experimentally, testing the stretch of the fabric.
They're actually comfortable.
Of course they are. Women's clothing has come a long way. Rebecca smiled. So, Dorothy, what's for dinner? The name slipped into their routine so naturally that Porter hardly noticed. During the day when Rebecca was at work or traveling, he remained himself, sending out job applications and occasionally meeting former colleagues for networking coffees. But in the evening, and especially when Rebecca was home, he became Dorothy, cooking in feminine blouses, cleaning in casual dresses, even grocery shopping in women's jeans and oversized sweaters. Rebecca encouraged the transformation with small gifts, a bottle of perfume, a tube of tinted lip balm, a silk scarf for his growing brown hair. Each item integrated into Dorothy's persona so gradually that Porter barely registered the shift. His male clothing remained in drawers, increasingly untouched. A month into their arrangement, Rebecca paused while helping Porter, now consistently Dorothy in the evenings, prepare dinner. You know what's missing? She asked, watching as Dorothy chopped vegetables with practiced precision. Your hair. We should grow it out. Dorothy tucked a strand of brown hair behind one ear. It had already grown longer than Porter had ever worn it, now brushing just below his ears. You think so? Definitely. You've got great texture. It would look amazing with some length. Rebecca moved behind him, gathering the brown strands into a small ponytail. See? Even this looks cute. That weekend, Rebecca took Dorothy to her salon. The stylist, a fashionable woman named Tina, listened as Rebecca explained what they wanted. So, we're growing it out, but need something that works during the transition, Rebecca said, while Dorothy sat nervously in the chair, wearing women's jeans and a loose burgundy sweater. Tina studied Dorothy's reflection. We can layer it to give some movement while it grows, and maybe some subtle highlights to bring dimension to the brown. 2 hours later, Dorothy emerged with a softly layered cut that somehow managed to look both feminine and not entirely out of place on Porter's features. The subtle caramel highlights warmed his natural brown, and the styling products Tina had used gave it a silky finish that framed his face perfectly. What do you think? Rebecca asked as they walked back to the apartment. Dorothy touched the soft strands. It's nice. Different. Different good? A small smile formed. Yeah, different good. The hair marked a turning point. With the more feminine style, Porter found himself slipping into Dorothy's persona more frequently, even when alone. The women's clothing became his default wardrobe, the masculine clothes pushed to the back of the closet. Rebecca introduced more elements, a lesson in subtle makeup application, a pair of low-heeled boots that miraculously fit his narrow feet, increasingly feminine accessories. By the 3rd month, job searching had taken a back seat to Dorothy's expanding domestic responsibilities. Rebecca's occasional dinner parties required meticulous planning and execution, which Dorothy handled with growing confidence. The guests, Rebecca's friends and colleagues, were introduced to my roommate Dorothy without further explanation, and Dorothy found herself easily accepted into their circle. You're a natural, Rebecca whispered one evening as Dorothy served appetizers at a small gathering. No one would ever guess. Dorothy smiled, adjusting the sleeve of her emerald green blouse. Guess what? Rebecca just winked and returned to her guests. Later that night, after the guests had departed and they were cleaning up, Rebecca broached a new subject. My parents are coming to visit next weekend, she said, loading the dishwasher. They've been asking about my new roommate situation. Dorothy paused while wiping down the counter. What did you tell them? Not much yet. Rebecca closed the dishwasher. But I was thinking, they don't need to meet Porter. Dorothy set down the cloth. You want me to be Dorothy for your parents? Why not? You're Dorothy most of the time anyway. Rebecca leaned against the counter. Besides, my mother has been hinting about my love life again. Having a female roommate would generate far fewer questions than a male one. The logic made a certain twisted sense. Rebecca's conservative parents had always been vocal about her single status and curious about her living arrangements. What exactly would you tell them about me? Dorothy asked carefully. Rebecca shrugged. Just that you're my roommate who helps around the house in exchange for rent. Nothing complicated. And they won't think it's strange that your roommate serves dinner and cleans up afterward? We'll say we have an arrangement. You cook because I'm hopeless in the kitchen, which is true. Rebecca moved closer, straightening the collar of Dorothy's blouse. Please, it would make the weekend so much easier. Dorothy sighed, recognizing the familiar pattern. What started as temporary always seemed to expand with Rebecca. Fine, but no elaborate backstory. The week leading up to the visit was filled with preparations. Rebecca helped Dorothy select appropriate outfits for meeting parents. Nothing too revealing or flamboyant, settling on tailored slacks, modest blouses, and a casual dress for Sunday brunch. Together, they practiced Dorothy's feminine mannerisms, focusing on voice modulation and movement. By Saturday morning, when Rebecca's parents arrived, Dorothy felt surprisingly prepared. Wearing navy blue slacks and a cream-colored blouse, hair styled in soft waves around his face, he greeted the Millers with a warm smile and a light, carefully practiced voice. "You must be Dorothy," Mrs. Miller said, accepting a cup of coffee in the living room. "Rebecca's told us so much about you." Dorothy shot Rebecca a quick glance. "Has she? All good things, I hope?" "Of course," Rebecca interjected smoothly. "I was just telling them what a lifesaver you've been around here. Dorothy's an amazing cook," she added to her parents. "Self-taught," Dorothy explained modestly. "I find it relaxing." The day progressed more easily than expected. Mr. Miller was reserved but polite, while Mrs. Miller seemed genuinely charmed by Dorothy. They asked about his background, carefully rehearsed answers about graphic design work that could be done remotely, and his friendship with Rebecca, which required less fabrication. That evening, after a dinner that earned sincere compliments from both Millers, Rebecca's mother helped Dorothy clear the table while Rebecca and her father discussed business in the living room. "I want to thank you," Mrs. Miller said quietly as they loaded the dishwasher. Dorothy looked up, surprised. "For dinner? It was nothing special." "Not for dinner. For being here with Rebecca." Mrs. Miller glanced toward the living room. "She works so hard, travels constantly. I've worried about her being lonely." "Oh, we're just roommates," Dorothy clarified quickly. We're not," Mrs. Miller patted Dorothy's hand. "Dear, you don't need to explain. Times have changed since my day. I'm just happy she has someone who takes care of her so well." She lowered her voice further. "And between us, you make a perfect couple. A career woman needs someone who understands the importance of home." Dorothy stood frozen, dishcloth in hand, as Mrs. Miller returned to the living room. The implication was clear. She had assumed Dorothy and Rebecca were more than roommates. More disturbingly, she seemed to approve of Dorothy as the homemaker to Rebecca's breadwinner. Later that night, after the Millers had departed for their hotel, Dorothy confronted Rebecca in the kitchen. "Your mother thinks we're a couple!" The words came out more accusatory than intended. Rebecca poured herself a glass of wine. "Does she? That's interesting." "Interesting? That's all you have to say?" Dorothy ran a hand through his brown hair. "She practically gave me her blessing to be your housewife." Rebecca smiled over the rim of her glass. "Would that be so terrible?" "Beck, this isn't funny. The whole Dorothy thing was supposed to be temporary, just until I found a job." "And have you been looking?" Rebecca's question landed like a stone. "When was the last time you sent out a resume? Checked job boards? Had an interview?" Dorothy opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. The truth was uncomfortable. Job searching had gradually disappeared from his daily routine, replaced by meal planning, housekeeping, and increasingly socializing as Dorothy. "That's what I thought." Rebecca set down her glass. "Look, I'm not judging, but let's be honest with ourselves. You're happier as Dorothy than you ever were as Porter. I see it every day." Dorothy sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly aware of the feminine posture he'd adopted without thinking. Knees together, hands folded in his lap. "This wasn't the plan." "Plans change." Rebecca sat across from him. "My parents are coming for brunch tomorrow. We can tell them the truth if you want. But first, ask yourself what you really want." The question echoed in Dorothy's mind through a restless night. By morning, dressed in a casual blue dress, with his growing brown hair loosely styled, Dorothy had reached no firm conclusion. Yet when Mrs. Miller embraced him warmly and Mr. Miller asked about his secret ingredient in the quiche, he found himself settling comfortably into the role they assumed. The weekend concluded without any explicit clarification about Dorothy and Rebecca's relationship. As they waved goodbye to the Millers, Rebecca's mother hugged Dorothy tightly and whispered, "Take care of each other." Back in the apartment, Dorothy began tidying the living room, falling easily into the familiar routine. Rebecca watched from the doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You didn't correct them," she observed. Dorothy continued straightening the throw pillows. "Neither did you." "True." Rebecca moved into the room, helping fold a blanket. "So where does that leave us?" Dorothy paused, looking around the apartment that had become more home than anywhere he'd lived before. In the past 4 months, every corner had been touched by his care, organized, decorated, maintained with attention that Porter had never shown to his own spaces. The realization was both startling and somehow obvious. Dorothy wasn't just a costume or a role. She had become a genuine expression of something that had always existed within him. "I don't know," Dorothy admitted finally. "I haven't sent out a job application in 6 weeks. I've been spending my free time looking up recipes and learning to sew instead of refreshing my coding skills." Rebecca nodded. "I've noticed. This arrangement works for us, doesn't it? You have your career, I handle everything else. It's not what I expected, but—" Dorothy gestured to his outfit, the comfortable femininity that now felt more natural than the alternative. "But it fits," Rebecca finished. She stepped closer, taking Dorothy's hands. "My mother wasn't entirely wrong, you know. We do make a good team." Dorothy felt a flutter of uncertainty. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we stop pretending this is temporary." Rebecca smiled. "Dorothy doesn't have to be just a character you play. If this is who you want to be, then be her." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. After a long moment, Dorothy squeezed Rebecca's hands. "I need time to think about this. Really think, not just drift into it because it's comfortable or convenient." Rebecca nodded. "Fair enough. Take all the time you need." The following week brought clarity through small realizations. Dorothy noticed how he no longer thought of the women's clothing as a costume, but simply as his wardrobe. How his morning routine now naturally included styling his growing brown hair and applying subtle makeup. How introducing himself as Dorothy to the building's new maintenance man had felt completely unremarkable. Most revealing was finding an old photo of Porter on his phone and realizing how disconnected he felt from that image. The short haircut, the masculine stance, the blank expression so different from Dorothy's easy smile. The person in the photo seemed like a distant relative, familiar but separate. On Friday evening, Dorothy prepared a special dinner. The table was set with care, candles lit, wine breathing in a decanter. When Rebecca arrived home from work, Dorothy was waiting in a new outfit, a simple but elegant black dress that highlighted the softer lines his body had developed through months of feminine posture and movement. Rebecca paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. "What's the occasion?" "I made a decision." Dorothy pulled out a chair for her. "About what we discussed." Rebecca sat, her expression carefully neutral. "And?" Dorothy poured the wine, then took the seat across from her. "I want to be Dorothy, not just around the house or with your friends, but completely. Porter had a life that was going nowhere. Dorothy has possibilities." A smile spread across Rebecca's face. I was hoping you'd say that. She reached across the table, taking Dorothy's hand. So, what does this mean for us? That depends. Dorothy met her gaze steadily. Your mother assumed we were a couple. Was she completely wrong? Rebecca's smile deepened. Not completely. I've watched you become Dorothy over these months, and I've seen more than just a physical transformation. You're happier, more confident, more yourself. She squeezed Dorothy's hand. And I find that incredibly attractive. So we're really doing this? I'll be Dorothy, your... Dorothy hesitated over the word. Partner, Rebecca supplied. For now. We'll figure out the rest as we go. They clinked glasses, sealing the decision. Later that evening, Dorothy stood in front of the mirror in the bedroom that no longer felt temporary. The brown hair that framed his face was undeniably feminine now, as were the subtle curves beginning to show beneath the black dress. Dorothy smiled at the reflection, recognizing herself fully for perhaps the first time. Porter's belongings, the few masculine clothes that remained, old ID cards, mementos from a tech career that never quite fit, would need to be packed away. There would be practical challenges ahead, legal questions, family to inform. But watching as Rebecca appeared in the doorway behind him, her expression full of affection and possibility, Dorothy felt only certainty. What had begun as an economic necessity and continued as an elaborate performance had revealed a truth that had perhaps always been waiting to emerge. Dorothy was not who he pretended to be. Dorothy was who she had always been meant to become. In the morning, they would begin planning the details of their new life together. For tonight, Dorothy allowed herself to simply exist in the joy of recognition, both of herself and of the unexpected path that had led her home.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!